an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion for the sake of the world. This delusion, it's gotta go.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Atheist Experience Live. It's February 17th, 2013. I'm Matt Dillahunty. That's Martin Wagner. We're here to talk to people. It's a live call-in television program out of Austin, Texas. And we'll have the number up. Actually, all the lines are already full, but we'll get the number up again soon anyway. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm crazy busy. Lots of
Yes, me
like
too.
16-hour, 12, 16-hour days, whatever,
yeah.
at work. But that doesn't matter because we're here to talk about God stuff.
We are.
And other stuff.
But mostly God stuff.
Yeah, it's, people ask several times, well, why do you guys do this? Well, it's a way to engage in conversation, and there's enough religious programming on TV that there ought to at least be one atheist show out there somewhere.
True. And it's also all the money and sex.
Yes, the groupies. And,
yeah.
But basically, we like having conversations. We want to know what people believe and why. And
yes, that is the biggest reason.
Maybe we agree, maybe we don't. Before we actually get started, since we already have full lines and you don't have a topic and I want to get right to calls, there's an email that came in last night that I thought I'd just read and reply to on the show, because I don't have enough time to actually answer all the email that comes in. So,
yeah.
Matt, I've noticed you're extremely polite to Christians during debates. She's watched videos of debates I've done online. Why do you do this when in fact they think you're a piece of shit? I suggest you watch Christopher Hitchens' debates and learn from him. He gave them no respect, which is actually what any atheist should do. They do think we're going to hell. I mean, come on, quit being timid. So first of all, the people that I've actually had debates with don't tend to think that I'm a piece of shit. They don't dislike me. I get along with most of them. I could probably call, any of them right now and say, hey, let's have, another debate, another conversation, with perhaps one exception. The other thing is that it's about addressing ideas and not people. I don't know what it is. I've seen Hitchens' debates, by the way, and I don't... Yeah.
He's not out there being rude.
I don't agree with you that he gave them no respect. I think he gave no respect to their beliefs, and he didn't. But he wasn't out there as a raving, screaming, name-calling buffoon.
Hitchens could eviscerate you in the calmest voice possible. He had that wonderful voice.
But
he didn't need
not necessarily saying yell. It's timid. But the other thing is that I'm out there to address ideas, and I care how those debates are perceived by believers. And actually, I'd rather be engaging an audience full of believers than atheists. Mm-hmm. That's what, I don't need to preach to the choir, I guess.
Right.
Thanks for that. And I will continue to work on getting better in debates. I do not think that your suggestions would actually make me better in debates or have a better result. So.
Yes. And you're probably the first person in the history of this show who's ever attached the adjective timid to Matt.
Well, yeah.
Most of the letters you get are like, God, Matt's really cranky today.
Yeah, you're a raging ass. What's wrong with you? And the thing is,
that woman just really does not know what the purpose of these debates are.
A lot of the frustration, though, is public debates, big public debates at a university or whatever. That I've done quite a few of them. They're a structured format. They are about addressing ideas. They are about having an actual debate. And one of the things that I've tried to do in the more recent debates is I hate the joint press release format where I get up and say my thing, they get up and say their thing, I get up and say what I want. And this quick little back and forth, no interaction,
forensic
and then
moves,
we're done. I mean, we could have just phoned it in if that's what we're going to do. And so I've tried to have more direct questioning between the participants. Mm-hmm. Which I think makes it more conversational and potentially more beneficial rather than sitting there waiting for 5 minutes and trying to take as many notes on as many things as they got wrong as possible and then addressing them all in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah.
Lots of problems with debates, but
that was an advantage of the forensic debate structure that led to the Gish Gallop, right?
Yeah.
It allowed the Gish Gallop to be this thing that was developed as, I'm going to spout 20 falsehoods in a rapid-fire pace, and then you are now going to be in a defensive position of having to refute every single one of them in less time, while I sit here, looking smug.
Yeah.
And that's actually the formal forensic style of debate has actually been bad, I think, for publicly addressing these ideas and actually having meaningful conversations about them. So
sometimes, and that's why things are a little bit different on the show. Which, quite frankly, I'm often more irritated than I'd like to be, and a lot of it has to do, as I've said before. I'm talking about Martin, but a lot of it has to do with the problems with the phones, which some of it's got to do with cell phones, some of it's got to do with this box. You can't always hear each other. There's issues, and there's somebody who emailed to talk about whether or not, once again, we should interrupt. And so I'll explain that again, and then we'll get right to calls. And that is, I realize that in normal conversations and stuff, it's generally considered rude to interrupt, but it's a necessity in this format because I learned from the past that someone will begin an argument with a flawed premise. Mm-hmm. And then they will speak for a couple of minutes to build up their entire argument. And then when you want to go back to that flawed premise at the beginning, they've now put forward an entire argument based on something that's either false or needs better definition and clarification. And when you go back to it, you spend a lot of times running in circles on that, where, well, that's not what I said, or that's not what I meant, or, well, here, let me say it this way, and then go on and construct another argument. And now you're just building up what appears to be a wealth of information that is all really based on nothing. And so I will interrupt, because I think, first of all, direct questions need to be answered directly.
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by that. Please tell me. And if you duck and dodge, well, then you've divorced yourself from the conversation.
And I think that was a problem that, in a lot of ways, impacted the debate you had several episodes ago with Matt Slick, where he bogged the whole thing down on trying to argue this semantic point about the difference between term A and term B. What it was, real things or conceptual things, and this sort of, and it came down to that. And he was able to really derail the conversation, I think, by focusing on that point.
Yeah, I think there were other problems with that particular
but that was
discussion.
That was a big one, though.
And they have mostly to do with the way Matt's brain works.
Yeah, there's that. But also, when you consider what you see on most mainstream media, or usually radio is where you tend to find the live call-in format, not so much television, but what with everything that, we're imperfect and we learn as we go, and we've been doing this 15 years and we're still going to work on making it better. But for any program that you find out there that has a live call-in format, I think that our show is among the best for allowing in-depth conversation to go on.
You call it a radio show, you've got 30 seconds.
Yeah, meaningful exchange of ideas, and it's not this soundbite thing, and you ask a question and the host gets in a cute little quip, and and this happens with politics and all kinds of things, whatever. I think our show is still one of the best for how we do it, even when we get it wrong. I think we do it better than most.
Well, let's get to calls so we can do it all wrong.
Yes, indeed. We're going to be very rude today.
So you got Frank in Scranton. How you doing?
Hi, guys. How you doing?
We're well.
Good. Mr. Dillahunty, Cowboy Wagner. Appcats is awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I'd just like to say, you guys don't do it right most of the time. You guys do it right all the time.
Oh, okay. Please. Oh, you.
Really? I mean, I'm being honest. Okay, but anyway, I don't want to take up any more time with praise and flattery, because even though it's well-deserved here. Certain scientific theories, well-respected by the scientific community, by the way, are just as valid as certain established religions. For example, string theory.
Well, okay, first of all, I think string theory is mislabeled as a theory. My understanding of it is that I don't think it qualifies as an actual theory yet. I think they've kind of co-opted that term a little bit. And I don't even know what my position is on it, if any. So,
yeah.
Okay, but
we know
you're
that it's
familiar with it a little bit, like this 10 dimensions of space, 1 dimension at a time.
I'm passingly familiar. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but
the best that I could say about it is that I know that a great many people in the field of physics reject it outright too. So it's not something that has universal scientific support, to say the very least.
So the note here next to your name is that the host and audience should be just as skeptical of certain scientific claims as they are of certain theological claims.
Exactly.
And we are. So
yes, we agree with that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what about the belief that our galaxy contains, as Carl Sagan used to say, 100 billion stars? I mean, doesn't that sound just as rounded off as, like, say...
Oh, well, it's not meant to, it's not meant to be an actual... It's not like there could...
It's an estimate.
He's saying there's not 100 billion and 4. It's not meant to be an exact number. When we say that the universe is, or the Earth's 4.5 billion years old and the universe is 13.7 billion years old, that doesn't, this reminds me of the old joke. This guy's given a tour of a museum, and it's an older gentleman, and he's walking people around, and they get to a dinosaur, and somebody says, "Hey, how old are those bones?" And he says, "Well, they're 63 million 14 years and 5 weeks." And they're like, "How did you date that like that?" "Well, I've been here 14 years and 5 weeks, and they told me it was 63 million years old when I worked here." When we say there's 100 billion stars in the galaxy, of course we're giving an estimate. It's not like we've actually counted them.
Yeah.
Okay, but is the distance from the Earth to the Sun an estimate as legitimate as the 100 billion stars?
It is around.
It's around 93 million miles. Yeah,
because there's a thing called perihelion and aphelion, where the Earth's orbit around the Sun is an ellipse, right? We know that. So there are times when the Earth is closer to the Sun than farther away, and so the 93 million mile figure is designed to be sort of an average. It's a mean distance. And it's just there. Yeah, I mean, that's very common. People do that all the time. You do average numbers just because they're easy to reference. But if you look it up on just Wikipedia, it'll tell you, about the Earth's, the distance from the Earth to the Sun, and astronomical units, and what they mean and how they're done. And so there's all kinds of shorthand. But the people who come up with these figures know this, and they're very clear about that these are estimated figures.
Would you say that Wikipedia is a valid source, though?
Well, it's for general use.
If it has references that you can go out and look further. I'm not. See, your point was originally about we should be skeptical of scientific claims as well. We are, but what you're objecting to are things that don't make any sense.
Yeah, they're very hair-splitting details about things.
It's not like I have this firm belief that there's exactly 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. I mean, that's not it at all. There seems to be like a gross conceptual error here.
Yeah.
Okay, because I said I am a theist, but I'm more so of you say free thinkers, but are free thinkers only people who think just like you?
No. Well, there are disagreements amongst freethinkers. I don't know.
Well, believe me, I know a lot of freethinkers that I do not see eye to eye on a great many things. But you know what? That's what it means to be a free thinker, is that you think for yourself about issues. And whatever it is that is meaningful to you. You form your own ideas.
Right.
Now, those ideas may be good or they may be bad. They may be founded on the solid facts, or they may be founded on informed opinion or uninformed opinion, but
setting aside free thinking and just talking about, for example, skepticism. I have very specific views about skepticism, and that doesn't mean that everybody who identifies as a skeptic necessarily agrees. I for one, hold the view that skepticism necessarily leads to atheism, and I think I can demonstrate that, and that there are a number of skeptics who don't think that, and it baffles me, and I'd love to have a conversation as to why they think that is, because somebody is misusing terms. Because to me, the proper application of skepticism does lead to positions.
In the same way that isn't a theist as valid as, let's say, a Gnostic atheist? Because I went to your Iron Cherry, it's an excellent site, and it talks about the difference between a agnostic atheist and a Gnostic atheist. And wouldn't
it's
Gnostic
agnostic
atheist be just as, I don't want to say foolish, but as a theist?
Potentially. It depends on your definition of knowledge. And that's, we're like way out in left field here. But when it comes to isn't a theist just as valid, I mean, everything about the terminology and everything about what you're communicating is just like a half step off. The theism is this position that a God exists. And my position is that a critical examination of the evidence has not provided us with sufficient evidence to justify that belief. Therefore, you cannot be rationally justified if you're a theist. Unless, you would need to be able to demonstrate some evidence that nobody's been able to demonstrate.
Well, would somebody also be lacking sufficient evidence to be a Gnostic, period? Whether they be a Gnostic theist, Gnostic atheist?
As I said, that depends entirely on what you mean by what the definition of knowledge is, and it's not. It's not even a concern. I don't really care whether or not somebody claims to know something What I care is whether or not they claim to believe it, because we don't wait until we have knowledge to act. We act in accordance with our beliefs. And so knowledge is a subset of belief. In some philosophical circles, it's been defined as justified true belief. I have my objections to that one. I've run with the definition where you can believe things to varying degrees of certainty, and knowledge, in a colloquial sense, is belief to such a high degree of certainty that it would be worldview altering to discover that it's wrong. But I don't care if you say you know. I mean, if you say you know something, all you've really told me is, I really, 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 really believe this. And all I care about is whether or not you actually believe it and whether or not that belief is justified.
Well, I'm surprised in the scientific community that certain people create their own definition of the word nothing, like Lawrence Krauss, for example, whom you recommended.
It's not him creating his own definition of nothing. The fact is that in different circles, words have been used in different ways. Have you looked in a dictionary and seen like number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4? Those are different usages of a term.
Of course.
So it's not like somebody invented this.
For example, the word theory. One objection that you will hear anti-evolutionists and creationists make to evolution is they will say, yes, but it's only a theory. And of course, what they misunderstand is that in everyday life, for example, theory, if you're just using it in a colloquial sense, means I have a feeling about something, or I'm just guessing here, but ... But in the scientific world, they don't use theory in that. That's not what theory means. A theory in science is not a word you get to call your idea until you can back it up with such a solid body of evidence that if your peers review your work, they're able independently to come to the same conclusions that you are. And so in science, a theory has to be a very, very solidly supported, evidentially supported idea, which is much, much different than, if you and I were just talking and say, I have a theory about why this, my favorite, baseball team sucked this season, or why, it's different from I'm just guessing in science. So it's the same thing as I understand in the world of physics, for example. Nothing doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as when you and I as laymen talk about nothing, and the mathematical application of nothing that Lawrence Krauss is applying is something that is understood in physics and not just a thing that he's pulling out of his hat.
And it doesn't matter at all, because words serve a purpose. They are tools to convey meaning. And you can make up whatever word you want, or you can use whatever word you want, as long as you are clear about what you mean in that context. And so it's not that physicists are just running around co-opting nothing or changing the meaning of nothing. They could have used any number of words, as long as the communication is effective. And when they're communicating with peers, it is. It's when you get outside of the localized jargon that people tend to get confused about those things.
Of course, but don't you think that maybe debates would run smoother if everybody agreed on semantics and terminology right from the get-go?
Of course,
you encourage that, right?
Of course, but this isn't about debates. This isn't about the public communication of information. This is about people doing work in a particular field and having a particular usage for a term. There's not confusion really amongst them.
And if they're in order to persuade an uninformed public about their ideas. For example, if you're a physicist and you want to convey your ideas to a lay public who doesn't have the math, doesn't have the background to understand what you're talking about, if you launch into all of your professional jargon and shop talk, then you as the physicist, if you clearly convey what I mean, but when I'm saying this, here's what I mean. When I'm saying that, here's what I mean. Here's what I'm referring to, and you can make that understood by your audience, then that's really all you need to do. Right.
Yeah, well, yippee-ki-yay, I understand that 100%.
Okay, so what's the problem?
But nobody has to accept something that hasn't been observed. Would you agree with that?
Okay, see, here's another thing, Frank, where what you're saying is like a half a step out in left field, and I don't mean that as an insult. Okay. Nobody has to accept anything ever. There's no requirement that you accept anything under any conditions. So when you say nobody has to accept anything that hasn't been observed, nobody has to accept anything that has been observed either. So sure. So when we're talking about this, I want to get to what and there's other callers waiting too, but I wanted to get to what your actual objection is, because you're kind of like half a step outside of what we're talking about at almost every turn.
But accepting evolution would be an argument from authority, wouldn't it?
No.
Because it's never been observed. I mean...
Yes, it has.
Actually, it has.
We're talking about the Planck wall. I mean, going back to the Planck wall, except that's theoretical talk, theoretical physics, just like string theory.
And that has nothing to do with evolutionary biology.
Yeah.
So you're now conflating different fields and different ideas in science.
Yeah, it's just really kind of bizarre because now you're talking about, as far as I can tell, I think you're talking about Planck time.
Mm-hmm. 10 to the negative 43 seconds, exactly.
Which doesn't have anything to do with evolution of the observation. That is the limit to which we can go back to the origins of the universe.
Yeah. And that's an entirely
which has nothing to do with evolution. Evolution, you're talking about cosmology now. You've jumped sciences and you didn't even realize it.
Mm-hmm.
I think people make their terminology more clear, it would be more easier for lay people to grasp.
No, it's not about it being unclear. It's about being uninformed. I have no confusion about the difference between cosmology and evolution. Evolution has nothing to do with the origin of the universe. Evolution is the the science of the diversity of life after life has arisen, which is still long after we've left the origin of the universe.
Well, then what would you consider abiogenesis? Is it a term of cosmology?
Abiogenesis is the label for life arising from non-living matter, which is something that is required prior to evolution, but it also has nothing to do with cosmology and the origins of the universe. The origins of the universe, cosmology, the origins of life, biogenesis, abiogenesis, the evolution of life after it's arisen, evolution. Really simple.
Yeah, there are a lot of different fields here you're conflating, and I think that a lot of your problems that you're trying to express to us here have to do with just being confused about exactly the subjects you're talking about, what each one refers to, what each one means, what each idea, the realm of human knowledge that each one explores. And so because you have these kind of confusions and conflations going on, you're unsure about this is what's led to your whole line of questions.
Yeah, and it's funny because
some scientists, when you say equally, because there's some scientists who say that there was something before the Big Bang, and then some say there wasn't because there was no time. I mean, it's just so confused. Scientists are. I mean, it's just
you're talking about an area where we don't have an explanation, and it may be nonsensical to talk about before the Big Bang.
Yeah, see, here's
nonsensical, but isn't that a way of avoiding the question? Say it's nonsensical?
No, to say we don't know, we don't currently have a sufficient understanding of that is not a way of avoiding the question.
And it's
a way of avoiding a false answer.
Yeah, and the way in which scientists do resolve the questions for which we don't have answers is they argue things out. They study their fields. They look at evidence. Some will reach, scientist A will reach one conclusion. Scientist B will reach another. They will debate. They will argue. They will discuss. They will write papers. They will submit them to journals. They'll get published or rejected, and then a whole new round of debate. This is how science. This is the self-correcting process of the scientific method that helps facts be understood.
Science doesn't make claims about truth. It's not about discovering truth. It's about gaining an understanding, the best possible understanding of reality based on the available evidence.
And it's not.
That's it.
And it's not, citing scientific ideas is not an argument from authority, because a scientific idea is not accepted simply because Mr. Prominent Scientist says this is true.
Yeah, it's accepted based on the weight of the evidence.
Right. Mr. Prominent Scientist has to show his work, and his work has to hold up. Otherwise, his ideas will not be accepted, no matter how big of an authority he may be in his field. Authorities in scientific fields can still be wrong. They know this, their peers know this, and the whole methodology of science.
And I'll let you get to this. I just want to point out one quick thing. The fallacy of appeal to an authority is appealing to an authority that's not an actual authority. If you're citing actual authorities, recognizing expertise, that's not a fallacy. Doesn't mean they can't be wrong, but it's not a fallacy. Go ahead.
Okay, all I was just saying is that, so what you're saying is, I'm trying to understand, is that science follows where the evidence leads, as Baker has said many times?
Yes.
Baker has said that. I've heard him say that, and I do agree. But the other thing is that what I don't understand is that you have all these answers like that, but
no.
When you feel more comfortable, like in the Northeast or Northwest instead of in the Bible Belt South, really?
Hang on. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah,
I mean, you're in Bible Belt redneck country. You atheists, wouldn't you feel more
Frank.
comfortable in the Northeast or Northwest?
Frank.
I mean, come on.
Frank, first of all, somehow or another we jumped topics. You went from an assertion that we know things, and I reject that. The claim you're not claiming, and then you went to, wouldn't we be more comfortable in the Northeast?
Yeah,
and we're in the Bible Belt redneck area. Well, first of all, you don't have the first clue what Austin is, because Austin is this liberal bastion. It's not Texas. Second of all,
It's not in Texas?
it's in
It's the
Texas.
capital of Texas. So now,
Frank,
you said that
Frank.
it's not Texas.
Frank, I said Austin.
So is this a...
Frank,
Frank.
you're being
Please,
so...
stop. Everybody stop. It's a problem with the phones.
Yeah.
Frank, I said Austin is not Texas. Do you understand kind of metaphoric, hyperbolic language? What I mean is your typical view of Texas being the red state, Bible Belt thing. That's not what Austin is. Austin is the liberal, let's smoke weed and get naked town. It is the let's keep Austin weird town. It is not, I'm simply saying that where I live is not where you imagine that I live. But second of all, how dare you insult rednecks as an actual redneck to some extent. I'm very comfortable where I am. By the way, boots.
Yes?
Yeah.
Got my boots on.
And in any event, what's it got to do with anything?
And this entire conversation about where we live, what the hell does that have to do with anything?
Yeah, so-
you know where I'd rather live? You know where I'd rather live? I'd rather live in a world where people base their ideas and their beliefs on evidence and make an effort to actually understand a subject before they call in to show that they don't know what they're talking about.
Please, no ad hominem attacks, sir. Please.
No,
we're not.
No.
Attacks.
Listen here, Frank. That was not an ad hominem attack.
Ad hominem.
Yeah, it was not an ad hominem attack. It was talking about what kind of world I would actually live in. It was honest. And you're the one who's sitting here talking about where we'd prefer to live and redneck this. By the way,
I mean that as a slur. Again,
by the way,
semantics.
By the way, another telephone problem. Again, an ad hominem fallacy is a problem. An ad hominem attack is not a problem. If somebody's a dumbass and I say they're a dumbass and they don't like it, that's too bad. I'm offering my opinion about what they're saying. I'm not assessing their entire character. I am a dumbass on certain things at certain times. I'm a moron, an idiot, a fool. And so I will also acknowledge that not only am I these things, but other people are too.
No, that's not. Say it ain't so, please.
Okay.
Say it ain't so, seriously.
Goodbye. Thanks for calling.
Yeah.
Thanks for wasting so much time to tell us that we could have lived in the Northeast.
Yeah.
By the way, if you go out and do a search, you can find towns in the United States listed, or cities in the United States listed by their religiosity. There's been some new studies coming out. I think Austin is like in the middle of the pack of the top 50 or something.
Yeah, we're about I saw
20,
that. We're about halfway down.
20, 30, something like that.
Yeah. So
I don't know. But yeah, I have no problem at all with living around a bunch of rednecks, even though I don't. I wouldn't necessarily prefer living where I'd have to shovel snow.
that's a thing. Yeah.
I also don't think that reason should be limited to little pockets. I think we should spread it out. I'd like to actually live where education and reason is most needed. I think that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to be your next door neighbor, Frank, because nobody needs.
Well, that might work then quick.
You jumped topics about 83 times, and ended up
is that
with,
a precise number?
Yes, and then ended up with, wouldn't we rather live somewhere else?
No.
Maybe not.
No.
All right, Isaac in Venice, thanks for waiting.
Hey, thank you. I've watched quite a bit on YouTube.
Hang on, I put you on hold. If you're watching the live stream and everything, you're going to need to turn that off or down because we're getting feedback. Okay?
Okay, let me turn the game on.
Okay.
And can the call screeners just tell people to do that by default? I'm sure you did, but...
How's that now?
Much better.
Much better, thanks.
Okay, I've watched the show on YouTube. I'm a first-time caller, and I'm getting a lot of echoing in the phone, so that's throwing me off a bit. But let me just ask a quick question. How do you deal with claims of the paranormal, and have you ever experienced anything like that?
Okay. Wow, that's different from what it said we were going to talk about. But so I just did a talk at the North Texas Secular Student Conference a little bit about testability and about claims of the paranormal. The James Randi Educational Foundation has $1 million prize offered to anybody who can demonstrate a paranormal/supernatural phenomenon. There's a difference between the phenomenon that manifests and the cause for the phenomenon. So it's one of those things of, let's say that I claim that I have this supernatural ability to predict a die roll. So the odds are 1 in 6 of any specific number coming up, and I can predict the die roll 90% of the time over really long strings of rolls. That's something that we would look at as extraordinary. And so the first thing you need to do is find out whether or not the phenomenon that I'm claiming exists actually exists. You have to do that in order to demonstrate that there's anything there to investigate to determine a cause. So far, nobody's been able to demonstrate any phenomenon for anything paranormal or supernatural to the point where we could then begin to investigate the cause. Now, the second problem with that is I'm not convinced that you could ever identify a supernatural cause for a phenomenon because I don't see that they're falsifiable. You may be able to demonstrate a positive link between things, but by and large, the assertion that there's some supernatural agent or agency or cause is something that I don't see as falsifiable, so I don't know how you'd actually demonstrate it. What you'd end up with, in most cases, is an unknown. There's some extraordinary phenomenon we've demonstrated that is actually occurring. We don't know what causes it.
Yeah, and I would go, I would add to that by saying that first off, I've never really had a clear definition of from people who believe in this sort of thing of what the word supernatural actually means. In the same way that I speak to people who use words like spiritual, and I ask them what that.
Offer a definition?
Well, hang on. Well, you can. Let me just go ahead and finish my point real quick, though. But building on what Matt said, what I would say is that if we ever encountered evidence of what people commonly refer to as a supernatural entity, let's say ghosts, right? Let's say that we come down with some really hard evidence of ghosts, like it's very, you can confirm it, we can get repeatable results. There's ghosts, they're really there. We've got one. It's solid. Well, that would not be scientific evidence of the supernatural. What that would mean is that there is something else new. There is something new about our natural world that we now know about. For example, ghosts would become something. They would become part of our natural world. They would become an undiscovered part of nature that we have now discovered. Well, in the same way that really extreme ideas in physics and cosmology, and if you go deep into the universe where you have quarks and gluons and talking about multi-dimensions and what have you, and all this speculative science. And again, these would have seemed baffling magical concepts to people 200 years ago. But they're new things that we are discovering in nature.
It's a little different from that. I mean, there are the proposed phenomenon are things that. That's why I was saying we would just have an unknown, that we don't know what the cause is. They wouldn't just be, it would be wrong to just say, oh, they're just natural. So, for example, if somebody claims
the natural universe,
the phenomenon is the phenomenon manifests, but the cause being supernatural. Go ahead.
Unless the phenomenon acted with what would seem to be intent or some sort of intelligence.
Which still doesn't confirm that it's supernatural.
Yeah, because natural things act with intent. So what you would have to...
What would you term that as?
Well, I don't know. I need an example of what you're talking about, because I've never...
Okay,
I've not only never...
I'll pull one out of thin air.
Well,
okay,
that's...
How about something... how about something moving that should not be moving in a room that has no reason to be moving... No physical reason to be moving.
How do you know that it has no physical reason to be moving?
That's the example I'm giving.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is you're making a claim that you can't demonstrate. See,
Okay, we'll say a book on a coffee table goes flying across the coffee table.
Sure. How did you eliminate all possible physical, natural causes for that book moving?
Because there are no other known possibilities.
No. That's a fallacy. Saying there's no other known possibilities is an appeal to ignorance, that we don't know of any explanation for it. Therefore, we're justified in going after supernatural.
I've never used the word supernatural.
Well, okay.
Well, but you just
hang on, because now I'm frustrated. I don't care what word you used. You just said there are no natural causes, which means you're appealing to supernatural causes, correct?
I said there's no reason.
No, you said no natural reason.
All right.
We know of.
Sure. No reason that we know of. So, congratulations. Now we have some. Now we don't know.
So I'm asking you. My first question was, how would you process an event like that?
Well, it depends on what the event is. In that specific case, we'd want to actually duplicate it and investigate it and look for natural causes. If we don't find any, that doesn't mean there aren't any.
Okay, let me conclude this call with this. Then, have you ever seen any of the shows where they seem to have caught events like that on tape?
Yes, they're disgustingly stupid shows.
Do you think that they make those up?
I think some of them have been invented as.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, stop. I didn't say I know. You asked me what my opinion was, and I gave you my opinion, and I did not claim to know. I am convinced that some of them are faked because we know that faking like that happens. We've caught people faking these things before. I cannot make that claim for all of them or any specific one, but they have not demonstrated an actual phenomenon sufficiently to justify believing it, and they still haven't and possibly could never demonstrate that it's caused by something supernatural.
See, here are the options that you would be here are the options that you would be faced with, Isaac, if for example, let's say I'm watching this video and I see some phenomenon occur, okay? There are numerous options. Number one, a genuinely paranormal supernatural phenomenon is being recorded and I'm watching it on tape right now. That's one option. Another option is that the producers of the show have faked this just for the entertainment value of the show. My opinion. What? Hang on. Hold it.
Hey, hang on.
I'm explaining why that's an opinion that I would have. Okay. The reason that I think that that's possible is because
you can listen offline. Go ahead.
The reason that I think it's possible that some of these could be faked is because I work professionally in film and television. I have worked on reality shows. I have seen spontaneous events. I have been on set when these have been staged by the producer. You know, the producer will come in and they'll say, talk about this, do this, you get in an argument with this person, let's bitch this scene up, people. I mean, they'll say that, right? And then it's all shot, and you're supposed to sit there at home thinking you're watching reality. So I know that if this is going on with dating shows and with, summer break shows and what have you, do I think that there's absolutely no faking anywhere that goes on with these ghost investigation shows? Well, no, of course not. So there's a very strong likelihood that that's going on. Secondly, secondly, I'm on to my third now. Third possibility is that we are simply witnessing a natural phenomenon that doesn't have an immediately good explanation or that we don't know the explanation for, and it's simply being interpreted through the filters of the people doing the show in such a way as to make it seem supernatural. This is a thing called confirmation bias. If you go to a haunted house with a bunch of video cameras and equipment and you're damn determined to find a ghost, guess what? You're going to be finding ghosts all night. They're going to be dancing through the halls. You're going to hear a shutter bang and go, there's a ghost. You're going to hear a pipe creak and go, there's a ghost. You're going to hear a mouse in the walls and go, there's a mouse ghost. You know, people who produce these shows are people who want there to be ghosts. So there's all kinds of bias that you have to rule out, all kinds of options that you have to examine before you can cut through that and say, nope, real ghost this time. So yes, there are many, many things you can consider. And you can't just watch a tape, say, that's a strange phenomenon, and go right to thinking that the supernatural is real if you're going to be rational about it.
There's a difference between demonstrating the phenomenon and demonstrating a cause. The cause is difficult and maybe impossible when you're talking about the supernatural. Not knowing, not having an explanation means that your answer is, I don't know. That's the answer.
Yeah.
And by the way, to kind of angle off of Martin's thing with regard to TV, those shows, it's like Will they find the Loch Ness Monster this week? No, because it was filmed 6 months ago, and if there was anything real to it, it would have been news everywhere. We wouldn't have had to wait for the advertisement for this show.
Yeah.
And there wouldn't be 93 ghost hunter medium shows, none of which have seemed to apply for the $1 million prize or anything. TV is not the source for good information about all sorts of things. If it is your only source and your primary source, chances are you are not justified in believing it. Especially if it's on like true TV.
Yeah. Or the History Channel.
Yes. The History Channel is probably the biggest abomination in the history of television because it portrays it, along with some of the other sciencey channels have gone kind of off the deep end.
Yeah.
At least some of the Ghost Hunter crap's on Sci-Fi where they're hoping. Yeah. It reminds me of the old 900 call a psychic things, and at the bottom it's, for amusement purposes only.
It's
people are going to believe what they're going to believe.
It's TV. It's an entertainment industry. Yeah. Now, but I'll wrap up by saying, would I like to someday meet a ghost or some kind of would it be cool? Well, sure it would, but, I'm not going to be haunting these ghost hunter shows, hoping,
Marcus in the Bible Belt of Colorado, how are you?
Hey, you're on the air, Marcus?
Hello?
I don't think you can hear us.
J-Mark?
Oh, hang on, I hit the wrong one. Marcus, now you're on the air.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, we're good.
That was my fault.
Not a problem. No, I want to say, first of all, I really appreciate the show that you guys have every week. I watch it as much as I can.
Thanks.
And, I just sort of, quote-unquote, came out the closet being an atheist within the past 3 months.
Well, welcome to the dark side.
Yeah.
We have cookies.
And honestly, I honestly feel like my experience was almost that of, like, let's say the Matrix, analogous to the Matrix, where Neo takes the red pill and he came into reality. Mm-hmm. And so now I have a YouTube channel, and it's Take the Red Pill because of that.
Cool. Well, good for you.
Well, here's a question I wanted to ask. I've heard a lot of people talk about, like, let's say the Adam and Eve story, in which they, I've told them that, well, God said, of the day you eat the fruit, you shall surely die. Mm-hmm. And people turn around and try to give me the excuse that it was spiritual death. Mm-hmm. Now, Matt, I know that you've done a lot of studying with the Bible, and Martin, I'm sure you have as well. And I personally have studied the Bible, and I have never come across any verses or reference that would suggest it was spiritual death. And I just was wondering, what is your take on that?
I think it's a post hoc rationalization, but I don't care. It doesn't matter. None of it happened, and whether it was a real death or a spiritual death, it's still a story, and it's still patently absurd. Don't eat this fruit, or you'll get knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat this fruit, or you'll live forever. If you eat this fruit, on the day you eat it, you'll surely die. Up until recently, that's not true. It doesn't matter to me how they want to interpret it. It doesn't change how absurd it is. I have no way of knowing whether the original author was stupid enough to both simultaneously mean that they were going to die on that day and then write that they kept on living, or whether the original author, this is partly where they get this from, had another meaning that we don't understand or that we didn't understand, because it's stupid to say on the day you eat it you'll die and then the next day you're alive, because if there were certain apologetics that said, well, God changed his mind and decided not to kill them, and then there are others that say it's a spiritual death, and I don't care because it's not true.
Apologists have this word called hermeneutics, which is a $20 word that means spin.
Yeah.
Which is every time every time that you point something out in the Bible that's absurd or contradictory or that just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, they'll say, "Oh, well, you're not interpreting the Bible properly," and by this they hope to sort of catch you out and say, "Oh, well, you poor fellow, of course you haven't simply studied God's Word as much as you should, and the more you study God's Word and be a loyal, believing Christian, etc., you will come into this knowledge." Right. What they are forgetting, what they're not really addressing is, if John 3:16 is true, if God so loved us, he wanted all to be saved and living with him in paradise and heaven forever, why did he arrange to have his holy book, the document in which His Word is made manifest unto man, be this confused mishmash of texts ranging several centuries, cobbled together by several more centuries of ecclesiastical arguing and editing and rewriting and re-editing and re-rewriting and re-editing, which at the end of the day has to be interpreted all to hell and back to make any sense at all. Why would an all-powerful being need this book that requires wild interpretation to be understood?
I think the appeal to the Bible is probably one of the biggest demonstrations that the Christian God does not and could not exist, because they give Him credit for a particular wisdom and sagacity that is betrayed by not only the character in the Bible, but the fact that the Bible exists at all. The fact that a being of that much intelligence would choose to convey the most important message in a medium like text in ancient languages, or in languages that He knows are going to die off and be difficult interpreting. It is, they think their God is just bizarrely stupid. Mm-hmm. And I think I'd prefer a God that was intelligent.
Yeah. I definitely agree. Hey, could I ask you one other quick question?
Sure.
Okay, we're trying to get something set up almost like the way you guys do over there in the ACA, because we think it's awesome. And what would you suggest, like I go research on my first step into implementing that?
To get a group or the TV show or what?
Well, I'm sorry, TV show.
You need to find out whether or not you've got public access TV in your area and what the restrictions are, because public access TV is dying. And not all of them allow you to do live shows. Not all of them allow you to take live calls.
But you don't even need it anymore, because nowadays we have we have Google. I'm sorry, we have.
That's all right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No. I mean, that was the next.
You were going there. Well, we just great minds, right?
Yeah, you can just do it online.
You got podcasts. You've got Google Hangouts. You've got web TV. I just last week there's a wonderful show out of the UK, Trolling with Logic, who kind of do what we do. So it's you can do all this what we do here online.
Start free and cheap.
Yeah.
Or start as cheaply as possible. Get a webcam, find out some people who are interested, give it a go, see if you got an audience, see if there's interest.
And if you just want to meet and hook up with other atheists in your area too, the way to just start that is through meetups and social hangouts.
Trust me, I've started that already.
Oh, good, yeah. Okay.
We're spreading pretty fast.
Yeah.
Well, there's already. I was just up in Denver not too long ago. There's a pretty good atheist community in Colorado Springs, and I find that that's the case everywhere. The more deeply inside of the Bible Belt and its buckles and studs that you get,
right?
The more atheist and the more vocal the atheist groups are.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Thanks for calling, Marcus.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, we really appreciate the call.
All right.
And Ronald in Indianapolis.
Oh, how are you doing?
Pretty good.
Just fine.
Wonderful show. I've got to give my accolades to you guys, and I had a question about what was your opinion on meditation as an atheist.
What's going on? Is this Ronald?
Yes, this is Ronald.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, no. I'm just confused because all day long the topic listed has been completely different from what the people are talking about when they get on the air.
But that's okay. If you want to.
Well, I'm just adding that. I mean, I'll explain my position, but you've had so much going on with your conversations with the other callers that I'm trying to slow things down a little bit and let you guys breathe.
Yeah, it's just weird here because it says the universe was created by a scientific process, not a God process. Okay, so far as we can tell, it's definitely a naturalistic process, and we don't have any reason to assert a God. So cool, I agree. We're done with that. Meditation. I think it's pretty clear that there have been demonstrated some real benefits to meditation, but that none of this actually requires any appeal to the supernatural.
Yeah, I have things that I do to put myself in a calming state. And so I do
too. It's just a problem with the phone. It's just a problem with the phone.
I know. He said, you've been very good today.
I'm trying.
It's been very zen. So yeah, I mean, but we are beings with a wide range of emotions that we experience all the time, and so yeah, those are good things to have, but they don't have to be.
I think what some people have done with things like meditation and I don't want to call it placebo effect and stuff like that because as far as I can tell, there are real benefits. And I think what some people have done is said, "Hey, this is good, and I don't know how it works," and then they add a whole bunch of crap to it, and entirely unjustified. It's kind of like, the snake oil salesman that, it's going to sell you a cure-all, and maybe it's got aspirin in it, so it actually works for something. And no, this is awesome, and it'll grow your limbs back, and it just won't.
I think it's an example of the same kind of confirmation bias that I was just talking about with our previous caller, where if you are someone who believes in a loving God, if you are someone who believes in nirvana, if you are someone who believes that you have chakras, and whatever thing that you do in your life that puts you in an emotionally stable and comfortable place, you'll attribute that to those things.
There's a lot of this that comes down to, hey, wouldn't it be cool if very quickly for some people turns into, oh, this is true. And it begins with these ideas that there is because we each have our own subjective experience within reality, that therefore we have something that's, well, it's true for me. No. There's truth. But this true for me thing goes, you see it with the what the bleep do we know and everything else, where we are inventing the reality that we're in. People have taken it, to that extent, and it's just bizarre, and none of it holds up. And so we may be crippling the discovery of good and real things. It's like I pointed out before that prayer can have benefits, and prayer can have benefits similar to meditation. It would be nice to investigate that and figure out what we can find out about the cause as best we can, or at least exactly how to consistently replicate the results and what areas they're effective and when they're not, rather than adding a whole bunch of baggage, which should probably just be called garbage, to it.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and what I was saying relates to my studies of all of that stuff. I'm not going to get into it. I don't want your eyes to roll back in your head. But as an atheist, my biggest issue with arguing, especially with Christians or other religious people, is the birth of the universe. And I've worked for years in trying to really hone down an argument to explain how the universe itself is born without a God mechanism. And I think I have that argument down. All that kind of led me to the. I'm sorry, you're going to say something.
I was just going to say you can't, and I'll tell you why. The claim is that the universe began without a God mechanism. You can't make that claim because it's an unfalsifiable claim. It could be, and the response from the theists is God works, through natural means. You can't prove that there wasn't a God actually tinkering and using natural means. So you got to be very careful about how you frame some of those things, because you end up with an indefensible position.
Yeah, the best thing to say, and really all you need to say, is that we do not have any reason to suppose that a God would have been necessary.
Yeah, a violation of Occam's razor or whatever.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Anyway,
go ahead.
Yeah. So please go on.
Well, the way I look at it, though, is when you take you say quantum entanglement and vacuum energy and the double slit experiments. It's my belief that it's these phenomena that people haven't really looked at tying together as a causality for the universe. I think the universe has left clues to how it essentially replicates itself. And I think it's looking at the overall, examples that are left that are basically what we look at as scientific mystery, because scientists really don't understand the why behind these things. And that's where my studies have come in, is to say, when you ask the question, what is consciousness? Really, the truth of consciousness, it only really has four choices. And you could call that a qubit, essentially, which is yes, no, both, and neither. And all the conscious choices that we make as human beings are based around that. And when I say you can have two simultaneous states at the same time, as a human being, of course, I'm sure you've laughed so hard you've cried. That's occupying a simultaneous state. So
no, it's not.
I'm sorry?
No, it's not.
Okay, well, how do you see that then?
Well, to the extent that I understand what you've done, because you went off in all kinds of directions, and as soon as people start throwing out quantum, I just have to swallow the vomit. Because it's used for so much confusion. You just said yes, no, both, neither. That's a violation of the logical absolutes. This is a category mistake to say that you're to go to human reactions and say you laugh till you cry. So you're simultaneously in a laugh state and a cry state. Well, those two states aren't mutually exclusive. The contradiction would be to both in a laugh state and not in a laugh state. That is a true dichotomy. Laugh and cry is not a true dichotomy. And so this is where people get confused. They think that the logical absolutes, they think true and false is a true dichotomy. True and false is not a true dichotomy. True and not true is the dichotomy. True and false only applies to statements whose truth value can be assessed. And so a statement is either true or not true. There is no both or neither.
Well, then my question is, since we're there, how do you view that scientists have witnessed particles either in a simultaneous state or two different states? Or occupying the same state, if you will.
Because those are not true dichotomies. I get this all the time. When I talk about the logical absolutes, people email in and say, well, what about, quantum physics, where something's, in one state and in another state? Okay. Something can be in multiple states. The fact that the problem is that something can't be in a state and not in that state at the same time in the same way. And when we've observed things that appear to be this way, it's come down to our inability to accurately understand and model this. It's not a violation of the laws of thought. And actually the laws of thought they're the truisms. They're not something that you would violate. They're not prescriptive laws. But now we are way out there. And there's one more call I want to get to, and there's only like 2 minutes left on the show, so we'll have to save it for another time.
Okay, sounds good.
But we do appreciate the call, man. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
There are people whose ears were bleeding already from tag and stuff. Cameron, we've only got about a minute left, so if you can get to your question really quick, I'd appreciate it. If not, we'll have to take it on another show.
Okay. Well, I was basically just calling in to find out, what's your standpoint and beliefs, basically. Like, what do you believe?
I believe...
me personally, I'm a born-again Christian.
Yeah, I used to be one of those. I don't believe that anymore, but I believe many of the same things I've always believed.
And what is that?
It's hard to say because I believe that the Earth is an oblate spheroid. I believe that the Earth orbits the sun. Things about facts, stuff like that. But that's not what you're asking.
Yeah, I think.
I believe. Oh, sorry, we are completely out of time. I gotta let you go. Send an email to tv@atheist-community.org or call back in next week sometime before the show's over.
Try to get a more detailed answers to you.
And if you hang on, I'll take this after the show's over. Thanks.
Okay.
We'll be back next week.
Thanks,
bye-bye.
everyone. So long. And sorry to the callers we didn't get to.